I'd like to build on a couple of points that Dr. Boskin talked about. First, I think it's important, at least in my perspective, that there is no California economy. To me, California reminds me of the old stories about the Greek city-states. You do have very, very diverse economic bases for the different metropolitan areas, and I think that's very important to recognize. Let me just throw out one quick statistic. San Jose and San Francisco are the two metropolitan areas that have recaptured their peak in employment since 2008. That's not true of any other metropolitan area in the state. And I think when you look at the different metropolitan areas, you start to realize that their economic base is very, very different. And what particularly this area has to say in terms of its economic future, as well as San Jose, is that it is very much, technology, biotech, a lot of education, a lot of sophisticated people, very global, very Asian in its orientation. I think it just gives you a very, very different character. And so to me, there is no California economy. There's an economy made up of 20, 25 different metropolitan areas, each with their own economic challenges and characteristics. And again, picking up on Dr. Boskin's point, a great diversity in performance among the different areas. As Dr. Boskin mentioned, the unemployment rates are quite different, but so isn't the labor force in different areas, quite different. And so isn't the demand for that quality of labor. And so I think you get some very, very different results. I think another hint what Dr. Boskin was talking about, and my second point, is that the labor market in the United States, but also in California today, is very different than what we're used to from the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s. There was a quick point made about part-time work. And it's interesting that part-time workers compose a greater percentage of the U.S. labor force than we've seen in the past in terms of economic recoveries. And also there are a lot of mysteries. It's interesting to note labor force participation for both men and women has gone down in the last 5 years. Even more important, many of us realize labor force participation for young people has really dropped off dramatically in the last 5 or 6 years. What a lot of us don't appreciate, perhaps, and one of the great questions we have to deal with is the labor force participation rate for prime age females, 25 to 54, has actually declined as well. And if you think about what we saw in terms of women's labor force participation throughout the 70s, 80s, and 90s, is that number kept on rising. And all of a sudden now it's declining. So I think when you look at the California economy, think of its diversity by metropolitan area. And I think when you think about the labor force, realize that the structure of the labor force today is very different than the kind of labor force we envisioned perhaps in the 1970s and 80s.
So to pick up on this diversity theme for a second, I mean, how would the, if the immigration bill were to get through Congress in something like the form it passed the Senate, how much would that matter to California in the short run and the long run?
I think both for the state and for the country, the devil's all in the details. As a general proposition, as a rough approximation, America, relative to every other advanced economy, has had an immigration policy that relied on much more on family unification and much less on economics. And we've progressively extended family unification beyond the immediate family. And so to the extent between H-1B visas, a sensible guest worker program, expanded legal immigration that's more economics-based in its point system, how the details wind up working out, if anything passes, I myself think it's unlikely that the Senate bill will pass in the end. But if a bill passes that has substantial elements of the Senate bill, the details will matter a lot on how much is economic. And I think most of the studies suggest there'll be some additional short-term costs, but this could be a substantial long-run benefit to the economy and to the state, especially to our state. We have a lot of costs, I want to just emphasize, because of this. We have 12%, California has 12% of the population, but a third of the welfare recipients. There are a lot of reasons for that, but we need to figure out a way for upward mobility for those people.
So I was going to ask Ann to address this, partly because Tech's been pretty involved in the lobbying side and what has some specific issues it wants in an immigration bill.
Yeah, I think as you said earlier, the devil's in the details, and we won't ever know the details until the end. But it is a very important issue. If you look at IPOs since 2008 and 2012, 92 of the public companies in that period, and there weren't that many, had some founders that were immigrants. It is very likely if we fund a company and they go to any major university to interview students that they're going to hire as graduates, they're going to be interviewing people that are not born in the U.S. and have to decide whether they're going to go through enormous time and money to have those students have jobs in this country. Otherwise, let them get educated in our great universities that we just talked about and go home. It would really increase employment growth, especially in the STEM category, where we have a high concentration in computer science, mathematics, foreign-born students. So it is a very big issue for the tech industry. And I doubt we'll all get what we want out of the bill totally, but any improvement forward would be substantial in the number of jobs that we could accelerate. And all of our jobs have multiplier effects in the tech industry. We've seen that result here in San Francisco. Some say for every high-paying tech job, there are 3 to 5 service jobs created. And also, we have found that these immigrant entrepreneurs that stay here also are large contributors to their own communities as well, and become the entrepreneurs who fund other entrepreneurs over time.
John, did you want to?
Well, I think it's not only in terms of venture capital and high tech, but working at Wells Fargo, I have one person on my staff that fit the bill, and we're still working through the process to allow him. But I certainly agree at the university level, again, emphasizing the California perspective. You have an awful lot of people who come here for science and technology and engineering and math who are foreigners, and it's, again, part of what we do as a society is being able to integrate these people into jobs that we really need to fill.